Michael the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it. Today is October the 24th, and it's one more day in the beginning of the last week of Season 3 of drawing a Disney villain every day for the month of October. I have another villain today, another Halloween treat, and ready to jump right into it and show you what I've got. This one is a really interesting, deep cut for some people, but this is a cool one to be able to do. This is Mr. Winky from The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, specifically from the Wind in the Willows Mr. Toad segment of the film. Mr. Winky was a character from the original book, The Wind in the Willows, by Kenneth Grahame. And in the book, he was probably most likely like the leader of the Weasels, basically. And in the movie, he's also the leader of the Weasels. He's the secret leader of the Weasels. But I think in the movie, it seems what they did was they made a human version of that leader, and they made him Mr. Winky here. Mr. Winky is a crafty, conniving tavern keep who basically in the movie, if you don't know or haven't seen it, he and the Weasels trick Mr. Toad into trading the deed of his estate of Toad Hall for a motor car that they have stolen, because Toad is obsessed with driving around in this motor car. And it is the Weasels and Winky have stolen it, and then they dupe Toad into trading his estate for it. And then later on, when they go to court about it to try to secure Toad's property, his friends try to help him, and they bring Mr. Winky in as a witness because all of this went down in the bar or in his tavern, and they think that he's going to corroborate the story, like, oh, he was there and the Weasels tricked Toad. That's what everybody thinks. But he is, in fact, secretly the leader of the Weasels, and he lies in court and, basically backstabs Mr. Toad. So he's kind of a lying trickster, which you can tell in the picture that doesn't seem like a very trustworthy guy. He was animated by a whole list of people, including some of the classic Nine Old Men. Ollie Johnston, I think, probably did the principal work on this, from what I could tell. But John Sibley, Hal King, Don Lusk, Wooly Reitherman, Mark Davis, Hugh Fraser, they all worked on this film and probably aspects of this character. In the end of the movie, his fate is kind of unknown, which they did a lot in those early Disney films. They just sort of leave the fate of some of the villains up to the viewer's imagination, whether it appears as if they die or if they've been arrested or reprimanded or whatever. They leave that to your imagination so you can be as satisfied as you want to be. A lot of the older films kind of did that, and this is one of those where you sort of can assume if you want that he was arrested and the Weasels were arrested and reprimanded for their crimes and all that, but it's never specifically shown on screen. This character is featured in Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, the Disneyland attraction. At one point in there, it shows him trying to serve up the mugs of ale, just like he does in the movie. And when he has those mugs in hand, I always thought that this character was a little bit reminiscent of, or maybe, well, obviously the other way around, the main character in the video game Tapper, where, if you're unfamiliar with the game, the one where you have to slide beers to the customers down the bar and try to go up and down the multiple bars and satisfy all the customers. He kind of looks a little bit like the barkeep in Tapper, and I guess all these barkeeps are they have like a stereotypical look to them, I guess, but I always thought that. Let me know what you think down below. I'll put some pictures of Tapper here, and you can decide what you think. The character Mr. Winky was voiced by Oliver Wallace, by all accounts. There are some sources that say Alec Harford, British actor Alec Harford, was the voice of Mr. Winky, and that may very well be the case, but most sources seem to agree that it was Oliver Wallace, so the overwhelming consensus seems to be Oliver Wallace. The reason for the doubt or the debate is back in these days of Disney, they didn't really officially credit the voice actors the same way that they do now, and they didn't keep good track all the time, especially for smaller roles of who did what. They were mostly just considered, group work or group projects, and other than word of mouth or people remembering exactly what happened, or maybe having recordings that you could tease out somebody's voice, put it together sort of forensically or archaeologically or whatever you want to say. That's kind of what you have to do. But most sources tend to credit Oliver Wallace for voicing Mr. Winky, which is kind of interesting because Oliver Wallace was a film composer primarily. That was his bailiwick, and he composed the score to this film, The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad. So this may be, I don't know if there are any other instances, but this may be one of the only instances, if not the only instance, of a person who voiced a role in an animated film and also composed the score to that same film. Certainly maybe one of the main villains of the film. I'm not sure. If you can think of other examples, let me know. That would be some interesting trivia. If you can think of any, let me know down below. Anyway, Oliver Wallace was a film composer that voiced Mr. Winky and composed the score to this film and many other Disney films and shorts, such as The Brave Little Tailor, the Mickey short, and a bunch of other films as well. Fun and Fancy Free. He composed the score to Dumbo, Cinderella, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, and a called Tonka. So he really did a lot of score work on many of the major classics that are known today. Not all of them, but a significant chunk. And that's a really interesting piece of trivia, that he was also the voice of Mr. Winky here, which I didn't know until I started doing a little digging for this video. So that was a cool tidbit to be able to turn up. Anyway, this was a really fun drawing. It came out really well. I think I captured sort of the sliminess, the sleaziness, but also he seems like a well-dressed, upright chap, but he's not quite. And yeah, it was fun. This is a favorite movie of mine, and I think it's somewhat forgotten, particularly when people do remember this movie. I think the Ichabod Sleepy Hollow segment really stands out more than the Wind in the Willows segment, and I think people tend to kind of forget Wind in the Willows and Mr. Toad and all of these characters. But it's very fascinating, very interesting, and it's definitely worth a watch. You can find it pretty easily on Disney Plus. And it's worth your time to check out. So I would recommend that. So hopefully you enjoyed this, learning about the character in the film. Maybe it inspired you to go check it out, or check out The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. I hope this was enjoyable and informative. Please come back tomorrow when I'll have another drawing for the last week of the month every day for the rest of October. Thanks for joining me each time, and I'll see you then. Have a great day. Bye-bye.